I cannot tell you how momentous this night is for me. I am home. I have come home. Finally, I am home in my great home state of Texas. It has been too damn long. You know, I grew up right in San Antonio, and most of my family lived right here in Dallas and Bedford and Fort Worth, and I even have family all the way out in Texarkana. Yeah. And I gotta say, anytime I'm coming out here to do one of these suckers, I get a phone call from my agent in Hollywood, and he's like, "What the heck are you doing? You're supposed to be making movies. Why are you flying around? Why are you going to places like Texas?" And I explained to him, I said, no, you gotta understand, they're doing this big event out there where everyone gets all dressed real nice and pretty. And they're calling it, this year, there's a theme called One Voice. And frankly, there is this one voice that I can't get out of my head. This one voice that sort of haunted me for some time. And I heard it the first time when a theater teacher, he brought in this cassette player and played this person, this voice, this speech for the first time. And he said, this is a speech that was actually given in San Antonio, Texas, right? And I don't like reading up here, but I'm gonna read you a little bit of this speech. He said, somewhere in Des Moines or San Antonio, there is a young gay person who all of a sudden realizes she or he is gay, knows that if the parent finds out, they will be kicked out of the house. The classmates will taunt that child, and that child has several options: staying in the closet, suicide. And then one day, that child might hear homosexual elected in San Francisco, and there are two new options. One is to go to San Francisco. The other is to stay in Texas and fight. And that man's name was Harvey Bernard Milk. And he had the wisdom to come down here and to fight in Texas. And with that speech, you know, he gave me an awful lot of hope enough to live. But, you know, it didn't quite give me all the courage I needed to come out. And at this point, frankly, I wasn't in Texas anymore. My family, a military Mormon Texan family, we've been transferred to a base right below San Francisco. And I decided, you know, I can't quite come out. I don't have the courage for that yet. But when I go down to UCLA, I'm going to go look out and check out this town called West Hollywood. Has anybody heard of it? Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what. When I went down to West Hollywood, they didn't have those horns the Mormon prophet told me that they were going to have, these gay people. They actually were having a really, really good time. And even though I wasn't quite courageous enough to be out, really, to most anyone who mattered, I actually started to have my first crush. And it was on someone, I was into really, like, much older guys at the time. He was 22 years old and a grad student. Yeah. And I'll just tell you a little quick story about this guy and what happened with this, because I was really thinking about him far too much all the time. And in fact, my senior year of college, down in Los Angeles, over Christmas break, I'm going to fly home. Now my family is way out in Virginia. They've been transferred again. And I'm just thinking about this guy on the plane, and all of a sudden I realized, what the heck am I going to talk about at Christmas this year? I mean, we are a good Southern Texas family. We like to talk. We like to talk and talk and talk about everything, right? But I didn't feel comfortable sharing, and I thought, well, maybe I should just make something up. And I thought, no, that's not going to work. I got a Texas mom, and she'll see right through that. Can't lie. And I didn't figure it out by the time the plane landed. I got to say, it landed, and I saw my stepdad there at the airport, and he picked me up, and he drove me home. And I saw my mom at the front door, and her arms were spread wide, and she wrapped me up. And I just remember thinking, oh, God, I wonder if she would do this if she knew. And right beside her was someone who was even more difficult in the family, and that's my big brother. And my big brother has always been, listen, my brother would gladly describe himself, proudly describe himself as a Texas redneck. Loves it, right? He can't get enough of the cars going around in circles. He loves to kill things for fun. He has that Metallica poster and the Megadeth poster, and he makes endless fun of my New Kids on the Block, my NSYNC, and my Paula Abdul. None of that was good enough for him. You know, and we just kept growing further and apart, me and my family. We were like oil and water, and I just wondered if they'd ever love me for me. And so what I did that Christmas is what I had done my whole life. Ask anybody in my family, I was the shy kid. I would never do this. I got quiet that Christmas, and I got shy, and I raced through Christmas presents and didn't say a word. I raced through dinner, I didn't say a word. I went up to my bedroom, I closed the door, and I thought, I did it. I didn't have to say a word. Nobody found out. And before I knew it, though, I heard this sound. It's this click-clack sound, click-clack, 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 coming down the hallway. It's my mom coming on her braces and crutches, right? She was paralyzed from polio, and she was coming to the door. My heart was racing as I heard it get closer and closer. And the door opens, and she comes in, and she sits down on the edge of the bed, and she just starts talking. Now, this is not unusual. This is just what we do. I just didn't know what to talk about, so she set the agenda. And there was this thing in the news at the time. I wonder if anybody remembers it. It was called Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Remember that? Love talking about that in past tense. Well, she brought that up, and she was, that's right, you can clap for getting rid of that sucker. She brought it up, and she wanted to talk about it, but she was angry not because it excluded anyone. She was angry because how dare they let those broken people into her military? You know, and she just started talking about it and going on and on about these people who we had learned in church were sinners. We'd heard from our prophet that this sin of homosexuality was equal to the crime of murder. I heard that when I was 6 years old, 3'4", and as my mom's talking, I'm remembering all the words I learned growing up in the South, growing up in Texas, hearing words like faggot and cocksucker to describe me. Hearing words, people say that this was some sort of a lifestyle choice that I had made, say at 6 years old, 3'4", that would bring great shame to myself and my family if anyone found out. And as my mom is going on and on talking about don't ask, don't tell, and I'm hearing all of these old memories of hateful things I had heard, I prayed that the wetness I felt in my eyes would not fall. I prayed that I would not cry. I did not want to come out. I was not ready to come out. But I remember that blink, and I remember the first tear falling. And at that moment, you know it, every single tear I had came out, and the room got awfully quiet. And I looked up into my mom's eyes, and what I saw was fear. What I saw was shame and regret. How could I have done this to my precious middle son? How could I have done this to my precious baby? And how will we fix this horrible problem? And, you know, the truth is we didn't. We didn't fix it on that trip. I went home to California, and my friends all saw something was wrong, and they said, "What's up?" And I said, I didn't want to tell them that my mom had a big problem with me. I was ashamed. So I just said, "Oh, my mom is coming for graduation." They said, "Oh, great, we met her before. We'll just do what we always do. We'll make salad and pasta, and it'll be fine." And I said, "Oh, okay, sure." And like anything that you don't want to have happen, that day came very, very soon, and I heard that same click-clack sound coming, this time down the hallway in my apartment, and my mom opens the front door and comes in, and there are all my friends, and they have made salad and pasta. And she walks in, and I'll admit something to you, I absolutely copped out. I never, ever told my friends that my mom had any problem with me. But I also never told my mom that so many of my friends now were gay and lesbian. So she comes in, they start serving her salads and pastas. I head to the kitchen and act really busy. And then I watch them start to come over and talk with her, one by one. And I realize that because I've said nothing, they assume that my mom, my good old Texas mom, loves gay and lesbian people. Yeah. And so they start, and this is before Ellen or Will and Grace, so she's a goddamn Texas saint, right? So they start telling her the stories of their coming out, the rejection of their families, not even being able to go home for Christmas, and that's going so well because my mom can nod you to death. And before I know it, it's going so well, they start talking about their personal lives, their dating lives, and their sex lives. And of course, one by one, my friends have their lives, so they're going their separate way. They're going away. They're going home. My roommate, of course, headed to his room because he knew what was coming. And before I knew it, it was just me and my mom. And she just did that thing that moms do. She patted the couch next to her, and she said, come here, sit down. We should talk. I said, okay. She said, I met your friends. I said, yes, I like them. I met one in particular. He's a 22-year-old grad student. I said, yes, I know him. And she said, well, I had a long talk with him in particular, and I did tell him that I think that he ought to start treating my baby boy a bit better, and that the next time he takes you to dinner, he ought to pay. And I absolutely lit up inside. I had this feeling in me I'd never had in my entire life as my mom wrapped her arms around me and held me tight. And I can't tell you the feeling of liberation and hope that I felt. Because for the first time in my life, I knew that my mom loved me for me. And how did that happen? How did that happen? Because she heard the stories, she heard the voices of actual gay and lesbian people. And those stories, those personal stories, they dispelled all the myths and the lies and the stereotypes that she'd heard about gay and lesbian people for generations, growing up in the South, growing up in the military, growing up in the Mormon church. They were gone in one night because of the power of their voices, the power of their stories. And I thought, my God, if that's the power of our stories, well, that's what I'm going to do with my life. And I graduated from college, and if it was a reality series, I did the gay episode. And if it was a TV movie, I did the Pedro Zamora story. And within 10 years, I was actually getting to tell the story of my great hero, the guy who saved my life, Harvey Milk. In hopes that others could hear his voice, and that voice could be life-saving as well. And I was so damn proud of myself for actually getting this sucker done. And I was so busy trying to get it done right, I was absolutely ignoring every single phone call there was, especially the one coming from someone who often it was a difficult conversation, and it was my big brother calling, and he called repeatedly. And I don't think I got back to calling him back until Sunday, the night before we wrapped Milk. And I heard that sound in his voice, same sound I always heard. It was a sound of something was wrong, something was broken, sound of desperation. I said, what's up, big brother? You know, did you get someone pregnant? Did you get in a fight over the Dallas Cowboys again? Which he did a lot. And he said, no, bro. Listen, you know Larry? I said, oh, yeah, I remember Larry. He's got a tooth missing, and you like watching cars go around in circles together. He said, yeah, Larry. So Larry broke up with me. I said, what? And he said, yeah, Larry broke up with me. So we were down in the basement about a year ago, and we're watching a race and having a beer, and Larry leaned over and he kissed me. And nothing in my whole life has ever felt so right. And all of a sudden, everything made sense. And, but he said that Larry had told him that he was worried people would find out. And Larry said that he had to end it because he was scared of what would happen. And my brother was absolutely devastated. And I said, well, boy, did you call the right guy, right? Right, yeah. So I whipped out literally every It Gets Better speech there is, every hope speech there is, and I recited it and recited it and recited it. But you know, there was literally nothing that I could do, nothing I could say to give him that feeling of hope and liberation that I had felt when I came out. Nothing. And I thought, well, how stupid, how self-centered I had been. Of course, I felt hope, I felt liberation. I came out in a state called California, where at least you can't lose your job and your home if you come out. He and we grew up in Texas. He came out in Virginia, where you can still lose your home, you can lose your job. And that means people aren't coming out of the closet. They're not telling their stories all of the time out of fear. So we're not dispelling the myths and the lies. especially in the communities he holds dear. He had every reason to be afraid, because the truth is, we were living, and still are, in a checkerboard nation where some areas are free and some areas are not free. And I wasn't good with that. I wasn't good with that. And so, I said, it's not enough just to fight for rights in California, is it? It's not enough just to make movies about civil rights leaders. And I got up on that Oscar stage and made that promise to the young people that we would have full federal equality in their lifetimes. So that my equality and my wins in California would be their wins. My freedom would be their freedom. And thankfully, when I got off that Oscar stage, I met a guy who just spoke here right before me named Chad Griffin, who had a strategy to make it a reality. And together with Chad Griffin and our beautiful plaintiffs, Jeff and Paul, who you just met, we sued the state of California in federal court, saying that the Constitution ought to apply to all people, that Proposition 8 is unconstitutional. And I don't know if you've been paying any attention, but we've been winning. Yeah, we won at district court in California. We won at the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, didn't we? And I gotta tell you, one of the proudest moments of my life will always be that moment I walked into the U.S. Supreme Court this year, and I heard Justice Kennedy ask a question. He said, "What about the children? What about the children?" And this time, he wasn't asking about how gay and lesbian people hurt children, all these myths and lies that date back to the Anita Bryants. He wanted to know, what about the children of gay and lesbian families? Why don't they deserve equal protection and respect? And at that moment, I couldn't predict the future and tell you if we'd win, but I knew that history had changed. I knew. I could see our bright future. I know we will win. That moment told me so. And as I walked out of that Supreme Court, all I wanted to do was to call my big brother, to call him and say, we are one step away. We are getting so close to full federal equality, where my freedom will be your freedom. My liberation, my hope will be yours. But I couldn't call him because it took 4 years to get there. And in that time, my dear, precious brother Marcus was diagnosed with cancer, and he lost his battle and he died. And he will never know a day where he is respected and protected as an equal citizen of this country. And this is a guy who loved this country. This is a guy who flew an American flag off the back of his truck. And he was never saw a day where he was treated like an equal citizen, an equal American. And the most important part of that story is that it's absolutely not unique. It's happening all the time. Right here in Texas, out there in Virginia, all across the South. And I'll admit to you, I got pissed off. I was angry. And I might have gone online on Facebook and I might have said some stuff. I sometimes do that. And all of a sudden, I said some stuff about what it was like to be in the South and all. And I heard another voice, didn't I? I got a message from another voice who's sitting over there. And this is from a school teacher in Texarkana, Texas, who happens to be my dear cousin, Debbie. Debbie, would you stand up over there? And let me read you what Debbie said. Debbie was pissed off at me. She said, "Southerners do not have a monopoly on prejudice. These old, outdated laws in the South will be undone. Progress is slow, but it will come. And never, ever underestimate a Southerner, and never underestimate a Texan." That's right, Debbie. So why am I here tonight instead of in Hollywood? It's thanks to Debbie reminding me, to Harvey Milk's call, who said you can go to San Francisco or you can stay in Texas and fight, and I'm back in Texas and I'm ready to fight. Because I know that our ability to win depends on what you do right here in Texas. And what is it that you can do? I hope I've demonstrated a bit of it tonight. The way to change minds is to tell your own personal story, to share your voice, isn't it? That's what I need you to do. Because if we can show the U.S. Supreme Court that we are making progress in Texas, if we can change minds in Texas, we can change this state and we can change this country. That U.S. Supreme Court never wants to be behind the arc of history ever again. They've seen that dark day, and you've got to show them the way to the future, Texas. So I need you to get out there, starting tonight, starting tomorrow, and tell your personal story. Tell it to everyone. Not just the people who it's easy to tell. Call that family member who you're afraid to tell. Talk to your coworker. Talk to your neighbor. Tell them your personal story from your heart, not a speech, not politics. Tell them about who you are. And yeah, you know what? I know it is risky and it can be dangerous, but we need your bravery. Because with your bravery, you can change hearts. And if you can change hearts, you can change Dallas. If you can change Dallas, you can change Texas. And if you change Texas, I guarantee you, you will change this great nation. Because not a single one of us in here, we do not pledge our allegiance to two Americas, do we? We pledge our allegiance to one America. Not a red America or a blue America, a northern America or a southern America. We pledge our allegiance to one America under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Because we as a people, we do not leave a single one of our brothers or our sisters behind, no matter who they love or where they live. Come on, Texas, give us our freedom. Raise your voice, raise your voice, raise your voice. Thank you.